This was going to be an update on the Riley, but I've had a slight snag. I started marking out the first hoop. So I've glued my templates onto the oak, trying to minimize the waste, of course, and figuring out where the joins need to go to give me the maximum strength across the grain of the timber. And unfortunately, it's all ready to cut out, but I had an accident with my bandsaw blade. In order to join the separate pieces of timber, what I want to do is cut slots in the end of the pieces, and then I will join them with a third piece of timber. I think it's called a spline joint or a splice joint. I can't remember what the name of it is. But basically, if you have a block of timber like that, I'm going to cut 2 slots in it, and then I'll cut a piece of wood that fits in those slots, and that's what joins the 2 ends together. And in order to cut the slots, I made this little jig thing where I can run the timber along the side of it into the blade, and you can turn this over like that, and it gives you the other side of the slot. This is just pine screwed together and glued together. That's where I went wrong. I measured it to make sure I wasn't going to cut into the screws, and I forgot to take into account that their countersunk slightly. So they were about 1 millimeter or 2 millimeters sticking out further than I thought, and it was enough for one of them to hit the saw blade, which instantly killed it. Just totally blunt, and the blade, they're just carbon steel blades, which are fine for timber, but as soon as I hit any metal, that was it. So the blade got blunt, it just wouldn't track straight anymore, so I bought another blade. They're not that expensive. I actually bought a 2 in case I do it again, but I think I'll be far more careful to make sure there aren't screws in the piece of wood I'm cutting. But that's the idea behind that. Since the blocks I'm using are these down here, they're about 32 mil thick, so I'm going for a 10 mil piece in the middle to sort of bind it all together. It's worth pointing out that these rails will need to be shaped. Somebody reminded me about that. I hadn't mentioned it in the last film, but if you look at obviously the side of the body, this is my MDF one, that's not straight, it curves. You can see it here. You can see there's just that much curve there. It's not a lot, but basically when I join this onto those base plates, I'll know what that curvature needs to be. These are deliberately made longer, so they actually fit in. This is to the chassis rail, so that wooden plate comes up to here, so I need to trim this anyway to get it all to fit. So given I can't do anything more on the car until that blade arrives, which probably won't be for a couple of days, I thought we might as well talk about the little KT250. So this is still more or less how I got it. It came with a few extra parts, new parts, which I haven't bothered fitting yet. The seat that was on it, that was this, is not an original seat. I don't know what that's off. I believe this bike has been modified for use as a farm bike, which is what a lot of them were used for here. So it seems to have this extra lever here. Well, you can sort of see how that works, but hard with one hand. Obviously that's for locking the clutch in. The handlebars were bent when I got it, so I just crudely straightened it out so I could actually try the thing out. What else is different on it? Unfortunately, I think all this has been hammered in probably to fit that different seat. I'm not sure, it doesn't look right. The tank's got a few dents in it. The inside of it is very clean. So if I can figure out a way to sort of pull those dents out, then I should be able to reuse that tank. I'm just not sure about this, if I can fix this, because it'd be very hard to get inside there. The other things I've noticed, the kickstand, I don't believe this is original. You can sort of see there's a big chunky weld on there. So I don't know what an original one looks like. It was also filthy. It's been washed a couple of times now and it's still got dirt all over it. So I don't know that it was ever cleaned. This rear tyre is pretty knobbly. I'm not sure they would have used these for trials type riding. I've got no idea. I don't know what the best thing is for just puttering around home. What else? I think this is the brake switch and I think that's broken. I don't know exactly how that works. I wonder if there's meant to be a little spring that goes between the switch and the brake pedal there. What else? The lights don't seem to work. When I first got it, the clutch was stuck. I couldn't move it when it was in gear with the clutch pulled in. But I just, one of the forums I post on, I mentioned it there and they said, oh, just get on it, hold the clutch and then slam it into gear and see what happens. And I didn't really want to do that, one, because I don't know how to ride things. So if anything strange happened, I'd probably fall off and hurt myself. But I did something similar. I actually just put it on the ground, put it into first, and rocked it backwards and forwards until I could feel it starting to slide, starting to unslip. And I got it to move pretty well, and then I tried it. And that was fine, so that seems to work fine now. These bikes have an automatic oiler, which is this thing. And the way that works is the throttle cable coming out of the control here splits, and it goes down to one to the carburetor, obviously, which is up under here, and then two to this. And this is a little oil pump, and the oil pump pumps oil into the engine, so you don't have to pre-mix anything. Obviously the oil goes in that tank. It's one thing I've been really wanting to check before I ride it too much, is to make sure that that oiler is working, because obviously if that doesn't work, your engine's going to get screwed. So I've got a manual. The bike came with a little manual, so I was following the instructions in the manual. You take this off and you can measure the oil coming out of the pump. When you do that test, you pre-mix two-stroke 20-to-1 in the tank, so obviously you're not running it without oil. I did that test. It was a little bit tricky doing it by myself, but yes, you can see that oil is coming out of the pump at the right sort of flow rate and going to wherever it needs to go, I guess. One thing I did notice is this front cover has taken a knock, so that's a bit cracked up. I don't know the best way to fix that. I might be able to heat that up and slowly knock it back into shape. It doesn't have to be airtight or anything. I don't know if I'd want to try welding this stuff. I'm not very good at aluminium welding, and I'm not sure how well that would weld. But if I can get that cleaned up and knocked back out without it breaking, then a bit of epoxy will probably fix that. What else? The speedo works. It's got that little speedo on there. It's in miles. None of the lights seem to work. The horn does work. These top nuts of the forks suspension things, I guess they are, they're little breather holes. They'd been blocked up with little panel pins, which had got all rusty, so I had a bit of a struggle getting one of those out, but I managed to. The forks are rusty, of course, because it's been sitting. So when I go to restore it, I don't know what you do there. I think there are people who can sort of grind it back and re-chrome it. I'll have to look into that. Either that, or I don't know if you just buy new forks for it. I think, as I mentioned, one of the reasons I went for this sort of bike is because a lot of the parts are available, and a lot of reproduction parts, a lot of the service type parts that you need. So for example, there's a new front guard there. I did take off the stays, so someone had basically cut the front guard stays off with an angle grinder sort of about here, which left sharp jagged edges, and I did catch myself on one of them. But yeah, it goes. I really need to to check it all over. You can see the tyre is pretty cracked here, so I don't know how long that's going to last. There is the chain oiler, so this is actually a little tank. I don't know what sort of oil you're supposed to use in this. I'm sure there's a proper sort of stuff. So that's quite neat that they reused the frame tube there to, or the swing arm tube, as an oil reservoir. And then there's a little oil thing there. So I should probably put some sort of oil in there, whatever that needs to be. I do have new sprocket for it. You can get new sprockets. I haven't really looked too much to see how worn out everything is. There's a tensioner on it. This is the air filter. There isn't an air filter. It's got a sock on it, literally a sports sock. It's been stuck over the intake, so I need to get one of them. Everything's obviously filthy. It has a main tank and a reserve tank, or a reserve position on the little fuel thing. This isn't proper fuel hose. I need to get some of that. I went to Super Cheap last weekend and they didn't have any. Still has the original key. I think I can get new ones of those, so I'll probably get a spare made. What else? I do find getting neutral quite tricky, so it's all the way down to first and then up one for neutral, but it's kind of a half click. I just find it really hard to actually get it into neutral. I don't know if that's just me not being used to it, or this bike in particular. But yeah, other than that, it actually goes. I've just been practicing riding around the garden very, very slowly and figuring out how you change gear. I'm pretty sure all the gears work, but I find it difficult to know exactly what gear I'm in at any given time. But I'm pretty sure I've been up through all 5 gears, just not very fast, obviously. Yeah, it's looking at it compared to a car, I don't really see that much here that you can pull apart and redo. So I don't think it would be a big job. It's just going to be a matter of figuring out where some of the parts and things come from. But yeah, I imagine you just literally take it all apart, clean up all the bits, check the frame for cracks, things like that. I do want to try and get the proper kickstand for it, and just make it a nice usable sort of bike. So this is the manual that came with it, and the chap I got it from gave me a poster as well. That's one that's restored, kind of what they look like. So you can see that seat that I've got isn't correct. You can get replica seats. Right, whoops. Yeah, it starts pretty easily. I'm assuming it sounds correct. Let's see if I can. How are we going to do this? Let's see if I can start it up. I think if I put this down without it falling over. Whoops. Let's see. It's very smoky at the moment because of the 2-stroke fuel. So yeah, that's about it. I don't know what else to say about it. I don't know what you do with motorbikes or say about motorbikes, but I think it'll be a fun little project. And the really neat thing, of course, is I bought this little lifter stand thing for it, just because I realised pretty quickly that would be really, really useful for working on the thing. Oh, one thing I do when I take it all apart, I think it's missing the indent thing on the starter, which also seems a bit loose. I think that's meant to click into place, or click into place up there. But yeah, it seems good. It's all pretty much there. It's all running. The oiling system works, which was my main concern. So I think I'll probably just practice puttering around on it for now. I have no intention of riding it on the road or anything like that. I'm going to talk very nicely to the farmer across the road, see if I can putt around his fields, which I'm sure will be okay, because funnily enough, our next door neighbours, or the neighbours across the road who have teenagers, they seem to have a bike. They must have got it recently. I've never noticed it before. I don't know if I'm now suddenly more attuned to bikes, but they've got like a kid-size bike and a full-size bike, and I've seen them in the last weekend mucking around on that and driving over the road to the farm and back. So yeah, as I was saying, the good thing about it is they don't take up a lot of space, and with this lifter thing, I can push it right back out of the way, up against the wall. It doesn't take up any space, and it's nicely out of the way. And I think even if you take it all apart and lay out all the parts, they're not going to take up that much room. So yeah, that'll be a project for another day. The other thing I really should think about doing is actually driving this Riley. I was thinking about it. I'm thinking about what I'd actually need to be able to do it. I need a temporary floor in there, probably just some sort of piece of wood. The bit that I've got in there isn't very thick, so it's not very strong, so it's actually got a block underneath it to support the seat. And I just need somewhere to put a couple of instruments and the kill switch, I guess. I guess I can just tape the instruments to the steering column, as I've done. It doesn't need a lot. You don't need a battery, because once it's up and running and going, it runs off the magneto for the ignition. So yeah, I think the only thing I would need is a proper seat back, because the driving position in this thing is so upright and you're so close to the steering wheel, and your legs are so flat out when you're working the pedals, you kind of need something to push against, I think. So maybe I'll figure out a way to do that and actually see if this thing works. The exhaust on it is good. It does seem to spit out a bit of rusty water. I'm not sure how long that pipe's going to last, because it's not proper exhaust pipe. It's just steel pipe. And the other thing is, I did get some of this today. We went out to the hardware place. This is, what's it called? Butanol rubber. Like they use for interior gutters and roofing and things like that. So I think something like that should be good, because it's waterproof, and I'm just going to be cutting small amounts. That seems to be the best thing to do. Is you just have a piece of that where it bolts through, and the bolts get countersunk into this. I can't remember how many there are on this bottom piece. I think there's only about three each side that hold it in place, and that should be good, I think. The other thing is the exhaust. Obviously, whoops, I painted it just so it doesn't rust on the outside. It's nice and quiet. It's not too noisy, so I'm pretty pleased with how that's come out. One thing that does worry me is it really seems to drink through the fuel. Obviously, I've had the O2 sensor on it, and that seems to be set up correct. I'm pretty sure the jets on this are pretty close, at least around idle speed. I won't really know until I get to drive it on the road or under load somewhere. But obviously, I've just been filling up that tube with fuel from this little bottle, and this must be I'm not sure what the capacity of this is. I'll have to measure that, but it goes through it pretty quickly, which surprises me. So I don't know if there's something wrong there, or if I've got a leak again, which is why there's a rag underneath there, which probably isn't the safest thing in the world. Yeah, it's it goes well, and it starts okay. So just wait for my new bandsaw blade, I guess, and start working out these frame pieces. So I think maybe what I can do as well, this is the one that becomes the instrument panel basically, and the way I made this last time is I had that go all the way and then I trimmed it, and I'm wondering if I can actually do that again this time and use the piece I trim off is actually part of the door. I don't think the door frames are quite in that position though, but there may be enough timber there that I can sand it down a bit to actually get the curvatures correct. I don't think I kept the pieces I cut off there, but yeah, it's just a matter of trying to minimize the waste on things. But I think that's it. It was a long weekend this weekend. It was Labor Day, so that's why I've had extra time to work on things.